Hey, what's up, everyone? Morey here, and today we'll be taking a look at Letsile Tebogo's 1946 and comparing it to Usain Bolt's 1919 to make it so we can get a better understanding of where Letsile Tebogo is at in terms of being able to beat that 1919 record. So go ahead and hop right into the video, and I do want to start off by saying that this is a different time when it comes to the training and some of, I think, the information that we have now gives us a lot more longevity when it comes to career. We can see that with like LeBron James right now, even Noah Lyles, and Justin Gatlin is another great example, somebody who is able to compete well into his 30s. Because when we look at Letsile Tebogo, one of the arguments everybody makes is, oh, look at how young he is at 21 years old, winning his first Olympic gold medal. Of course, he's going to be able to win or run faster than in 1919. He has so much more time left to go. Well, Usain Bolt ran this 1919, we can see here, in 2009, which is when he was 22, about to turn 23 years old. So he was not that much older than Letsile Tebogo. Again, we see that a lot more athletes are able to have their primes later on in their careers, so there does still open that window. But to say, oh yeah, because Letsile Tebogo is so young, he definitely has this opportunity is not really accurate because of what we've seen with Usain Bolt. And, you know, a lot of times the more you train and the harder you have to push your body, then you're going to end up seeing a bit of a decline. So we'll go ahead and hop right into it. So I love with this really getting into the numbers. Like, let's see the specifics of where is Letsile Tebogo at. Obviously, we're looking at the 200-meter final here. I like this side view. And this is where, again, he ran the 1946. We can kind of see it at the bottom. He ran 1946. And I think it's important to see some of the comparing statistics between the two. And really what ended up standing out to me was Tebogo in the first 100 runs a 10:12, and Usain Bolt runs a 992. And I think this is the fastest 100-meter or first 100-meter that has ever been run in the 200. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's the fastest, 992. Just to be under 10 in that first 100 when running the 200 is super impressive because you're running that curve. So that's really what set him up, because Usain Bolt on the second half ran a 927, which isn't super impressive overall. To give some context, when when Johan Blake ran and I'll go back here, when Johan Blake ran that 1926 here, he ran a 912 in that second 100, where you can see Usain Bolt 927. So that's a big difference, a big gap. And when we go back into those numbers, what we see with Letsile Tebogo is he's actually running that second 100 at about a 934. So 10:12 first and then 934 second. And so to me, the biggest gap he needs to make up would be that second to get closer to like a Johan Blake type number, which is a 912, just because it's going to be so hard. What makes Usain Bolt great and one of the greatest ever is his acceleration. He might be the greatest accelerator of all time because of how big he was and still able to run, again, 992 in the first 100, 629 in the first 60, which is just unbelievable. Subin Chin, Christian Coleman, those are the only guys that have been able to get in that same range. I mean, obviously there's some shorter guys, but nobody that's that tall has gotten into that type of quickness in the 60. And a lot of, to me, what ends up being a big part of that ends up being that scoliosis that he had, because it probably gave him so much range of motion in the hips, in combination with his core development. I'm actually reading his book right now, and they're getting into when he first found out about the scoliosis. And you could see, and he talks about how important the core development is. And so it's probably the combination of building up that core with also having to understand how to be able to generate large amounts of force with back that is essentially crooked, made it so he was able to adapt in a way that really led to him being the greatest sprinter ever. And so we're looking at, again, the top speed, because I don't know if Letsile Tebogo will really be able to make up that much time getting from a 10:12 down to a 9:92. So to me, if you take off 0.2 of a second, this is where it gets interesting to me when it comes to getting into the numbers. And this is where I think with the training, I can kind of differentiate myself because the information ends up being just very specific in what are we trying to really accomplish when it comes to coaching an athlete on how to improve their sprinting and what are the objective ways that we could actually make a difference. If we're not looking specifically at the numbers, then there's really no way to accurately predict where we are in the vast expectations that are put on athletes to be able to achieve at a very high level. And so when you look, it's really a 0.2 difference that Letsile Tebogo has to make up. 0.2 is a giant amount of improvement that needs to be made. But if we break that up into each one of the 10-meter segments, it's essentially 100 segments, that's still a 0.02, a consistently 0.02 improvement, which is just to give an indication, if you're going from 0.85, right? So one 10-meter block from 0.85 in 10 meters, right? That speed is 26.2 miles an hour. Or sorry, 26.32 miles an hour. And you take that down to 87, and now we're talking 25.7 miles an hour. Now, 25.7 compared to 26.3 from our perspective might not seem like a lot. It is a lot. And to be able to, again, sustain that over a large period of time. So, we go into a lot of these numbers here where you're looking at his 0.90, 0.91, 0.91, 0.93. All of those would have to be 0.2 faster, right? So instead of 0.91, he'd have to be at 0.89, which is 25 miles an hour. Right now, he's at like 24.7, right? And he'd have to go up to 25.1. But you have to do that each and every 10-meter segment, which is what makes it very, very difficult. And again, this is where we talked about before with Noah Lyles. I did a video and I posted it earlier today, where when you really get into the specifics of it, it's hard to be able to really say that he's going to be able to accomplish this just because the gap is so big. When you watch Kenny Bednarik here, Kenny Bednarik's fast. Noah Lyles is fast. Ari Knighton is fast. All these guys in the video are fast. And you could tell that Letsile Tebogo is not really outrunning him by a ton, right? I mean, he's obviously faster, right? It's not like he's not outrunning him. But when you look at that in comparison to watching Usain Bolt when he ran the 1919, it's just a whole nother level. I mean, it's nobody's even in the frame. It's not, oh yeah, barely beating people at the frame. This is for 1946 at 21 years old, and this is 1919 at 22 years old. Okay, so yeah, he has time. Letsile Tebogo has time, but he doesn't have a tremendous amount. He doesn't have 10 years of time, in my opinion. Maybe he does. I haven't seen anybody, run that fast in their 30s, but I could be wrong. Letsile Tebogo might be the first ever, but there's nobody even in the frame. And he ran 1919. This ends up going down to 1919, right? And so the amount of improvement that you have to make is just tremendous because 19.4 is great, right? That's a great number to run. 1946. But Usain Bolt ran 19.4 or under 4 times. So he still has a 600th of an improvement to make. Even that is a huge, even from going to 1946 to 1940 is not an easy accomplishment because that takes in 6 different 10-meter blocks a 100th of an improvement, right? And being able to also sustain that level of production. Again, 1946 is a great accomplishment. That is not an easy thing to run. That's why that's his best that he's ran. He ran that in the Olympics, right? So to go and take 100th off in 10 different segments and also perform at such a high level where you're running that 10-12 in the first 100 meter, right? Most people that are running the 200 meters, they're hoping to get in like under 20, right? Anything under 20 is like, that's a huge accomplishment, right? Under 19.5 is a huge accomplishment. It's something that's not done very often. So the fact that he ran 1946 is like, boom, you're in the top 10 best ever 200-meter sprints of all time, sprinters of all time. 1946. Now we're talking a whole nother level when it comes to getting into 1919. And the fact that so many people want to talk about how Usain Bolt's 1919 is the most at risk of all of them. The only reason that is because of that second 100 and how he could have probably ran a faster second 100 if he wasn't just absolutely destroying everybody here. No, again, he ended up running it in 927, where Johan Blake was able to run it in 912. Right. But just imagine if he ran 920, then we'd be talking about a whole nother level. But no one's even gotten, close to that really when it comes to, even getting down to 1920, 1921. The closest one is 1926. Again, Johan Blake, not even competing now. So let's beat Johan Blake 1926. Let's see somebody get 19.3 before we start talking about sub 19.3 before we start talking about how Usain Bolt's 1919 is going to be easily beaten, or how that is something that is a number or a record that is the easier record. I mean, in some ways I agree, in some ways I disagree, just because when you look at the 60, you do see people that run a faster 60, right? Faster than the 629. And that's really what you'd have to do. You'd have to beat them in that 60 in order to make that happen. There are people that do that, and there is a possibility there. It would just need to be somebody that's pretty tall, pretty fast in order to do that. So, I mean, I know it's a debate. I'd love to hear guys' thoughts of which one of those two records are more challenging to be able to beat. And yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. We always do videos like this, breakdowns. Let me know if you have any recommendations, and we'll talk to you soon.